So today we're going to be going over how to change out the motor on your swimming pool pump. So the few basic tools that you're going to need are obviously your replacement motor. You're going to want some latex or nitrile gloves. You'll probably need a few different kinds of screwdrivers. I really like this 11-in-1 by Klein. You can find those at your big box stores. You might need a wrench or two, a go kit for your specific pump that you are replacing the motor on, as well as a ratchet set. And these are some pretty basic tools, but that should be about all you need. A little bonus item that I like is the cordless powered ratchet, and that saves a whole lot of time, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of these all in one day, and also a lot of frustration because sometimes the bolts that hold the motor onto the pump are in a very peculiar spot and you don't have a whole lot of room to turn the ratchet. So that can actually save you a lot of time, a lot of frustration, and some busted knuckles. Now, if you're wondering if your pump motor has gone bad, if it sounds something like this, then it probably has. So now we're going to fix that by replacing that motor. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your equipment is in service mode, and for a little bit of extra safety, you can turn off the breakers that are controlling the equipment that you're going to be working on. So this particular pump that we are going to be working on is actually below the level of the pool. So we're going to close the valves that access that pool, make sure there's no built-up water pressure in there. So we have our cordless ratchet here, and you're going to see real quick why this is such a great tool. All right, so this particular pump is a Pentair Whisper Flow. You may not have this exact pump, but the information I'm going to give you is going to be good no matter what piece of equipment you have. These first four on this particular pump screw right into the pump body. Now, if you have a Pentair, be careful with these two side bolts here. And as you can see, we might need a wrench on that one. Because these bolts here come off. So you make sure you don't want to lose those. Now, if you have enough room on your equipment pad, feel free to disconnect the electric before you remove the motor from the pump. But in this case, we don't have as much room to work with. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and remove the dry end, and then we're going to be able to turn it up here so that we can get better access to the electrical components. Now, you will also notice that some of the gaskets may fall off. This is why we get the Go Kit to replace all of these, because you want to protect that investment of that new motor. Make sure all the gaskets are new, so that they make sure they do their job and protect that new motor. Now, at times, this bonding lug connection will get rusted in place, and you won't be able to take that off with a screwdriver. So it's fine if you just make a cut on it. Just try not to cut too much off, because you know you're going to need more slack, as much slack as possible in the future. All right. If you have a good 1/4-inch socket driver, you'll be able to use that pretty frequently when doing these jobs. which is another reason why I like this 11-in-1 driver. All right, and of course you have verified that your power is turned off, so we can go ahead and disconnect the electricity from the pump. Most pumps are going to be, for in-ground pools, are going to be 240 volt. I've already checked this one. It is 240 volt. You may want to double check to make sure that the voltage going to your pump is 240 and not 120. That is a very important thing to make a note of before you take the wires off of here, because if you do have 120, it matters which wire goes to which lead. If you have 240, then it doesn't really matter. Now, when you're dealing with these connectors, I recommend you pull one through at a time. You probably won't have room, if they're all the same length, to pull them all through at the same time. So you just pull them through like so. And there you have it. The motor has been disconnected from the pump, and now we can take it to a nice workbench style area to have some better access to it. All right, so now we've got our old motor on our workstation, and now we're going to continue to remove the permanent pump parts from the motor itself. So the first thing we want to do is remove the diffuser, and as you can see, that is attached by 2 Allen head screws. So we're going to go ahead and loosen those up and take them out. And then, of course, keep them in a safe place. You do not want to lose these. All right, so put that aside there. So your impeller may or may not have a screw holding the impeller to the motor. If it does, it is almost always reverse threaded. So what we're going to do is take our wrench and our screwdriver, we're going to take the shaft cover off, put a wrench on it, and then put our screwdriver in. And remember, it's reverse threaded, so we want to turn it right to loosen. And here it comes. All right, make sure that's put in a safe location. And then your impeller is going to be threaded the normal way. And sometimes it might need a little help. That's why I carry this jumbo channel lock right here. And just gently put it over the impeller. You don't want to put too much pressure on it. You're just trying to give yourself a little bit extra grip. All right. So once we've got that broken loose there, we can remove the impeller. Now that we've got the impeller off, we will need to get that part of the shaft seal out. But first, we're going to remove the seal plate from the motor, and that will be the last piece that we have to remove from the old motor before we start putting the new motor back together. All right, and that's it for the old motor. Okay, so now we're going to remove the rest of the shaft seals, and then we're going to clean up these parts before we start putting them on the new motor. All right, so that is the ceramic portion of the shaft seal. There's two different portions. There's the ceramic portion, and then there's the spring-loaded portion. The spring-loaded portion you can usually get out with the flathead of a screwdriver. All right, so now that the old shaft seal is out, we want to clean up this seal plate before we start putting things back on here. Gently scrape out anything that may be in there that could interfere. All right, looks like we got most of the sludge out of there. All right, and before we put the new shaft seal in, we're going to go ahead and unbox our motor. You'll find your warranty information in there. Want to hold on to that. Most of these motors have a 1-year warranty built in. Before we mount the seal plate on the motor, we want to put the shaft seal on the seal plate. Now to do this, this is what your gloves come in for. So let me make two things very, very clear. Absolutely every time you replace the motor or remove the motor, you must replace the shaft seal. These are very delicate and they're not very expensive, so I think they're about $19, $20. But every time that you have to remove the shaft seal, you must replace it. Do not reuse the old shaft seal. The second thing being, you cannot touch the shaft seal with your bare skin. That is why you wear the gloves. It does not protect your hand. It protects the parts of the shaft seal. In particular, this white ceramic bit and this shiny black part. Those two face each other, and they can be degraded by the oils of your skin. So do not ever touch those with your bare skin. I don't care how clean your hands are. Do not do that. If you do touch it, go out and get a new shaft seal, because you will have a seal failure. Another thing to keep in mind, do not use any kind of glue or silicone or anything inside, in between the seal plate and your shaft seal. The only thing I use is this. It is made by the same manufacturer as the seal. This is not to create a seal between your shaft seal and the seal plate. This is just a lubricant to make it easier to put it in place. This does have a snugger fit, so we're just going to add a little bit. Just a little bit around the rim. All right, and I can't be sure if I've contaminated that glove, so I'm going to throw it out. All right, so I'm going to get a new glove. We're going to put the shaft seal in place. All right, now that the shaft seal is in the seal plate, now we're going to mount it on the front of the new motor. Very gentle. Going to reuse the bolt. We'll make sure that the holes are lined up. Now you don't need any seals in between the motor and the seal plate, because the seal plate should be where the buck stops as far as water. And while you do want the bolts to be snug, you do not need to over tighten them when connecting the new motor to the seal plate. Or else, if you ever have to service this motor again, well, you may not be able to get these out and may have to cut them out, you may have to cut the bolts out, or just buy a new seal plate because you won't be able to get the old seal plate off of your motor. All right, now, before we put the impeller back on, now again, we must get our gloves. Remove the shaft seal from its packaging. And again, you can put a little bit of lube in there. Just to make sure everything slides in nicely. Now, in order to access our new drive shaft, we have to take the rear cover off. And you can see it right there, spinning nice and freely. We're going to put our wrench right on it. Now we're going to spin our impeller back on to our new motor. Remember, the impeller is threaded correctly, right tight, left loose, but then we have to put the screw in, which is reverse threaded. Just snug that up. All right, now we're ready to put our diffuser back on. So we're just going to line up these pegs with the holes on the seal plate and make sure the screws go into the metal mountings there, just as so. And we can screw these back in. All right, now we're ready to start replacing some of the gaskets and O-rings, and I recommend you spend a little bit extra money every time you do replace your motor because you want to protect that investment. So go ahead and get the whole Go kit every time, not just a new shaft seal. This Go kit stands for gaskets and O-rings. It comes with everything that the pump needs, including the lid O-ring. Now, my personal preference is I'm not partial to the shaft seals from this particular manufacturer, but it's still cheaper for me to just go ahead and get all the O-rings replaced. And so I get that whole Go kit. Now, as you can see, this has multiple different sizes of O-rings, and that's because over time, the manufacturer has changed the sizes of the pump just slightly. So you want to make sure you get the right fit each time on each one. All right, and a little bit of lube comes with the Go kit as well. So you just want to put just a little bit on there. You don't need too much. Just enough to get a good seal. Then you put that O-ring or that gasket in place. And it's handy to keep the old gaskets just to be able to compare to make sure you're putting the right size back in. Man, those mosquitoes are eating me alive today. All right. Always handy to have some rags on hand, because this job, as with most pool jobs, can be messy. All right, and before we take this back to the pump, one last thing that I always like to replace every time is the conduit connection. Make sure you get that good watertight seal. Again, these parts aren't much, a few dollars a piece, and you want to protect the investment of your new motor. The motors are not just a few dollars a piece. Those can be several $100s. All right, so now we're ready to take this assembly back to the main pump and hook it back up. All right, and just as we disconnected the electric after we took the motor off, before we put the motor back on, we're going to reconnect the electrical. Obviously, it is still turned off at the breaker. Get that there. Now again, I've already verified this pump is hooked up to 220 volts, so it doesn't matter which lead or which terminal, which wire it goes to, because both of these wires supply 120 volts. There is no neutral. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and put our back plate on, get that all closed in, and then we'll be ready to attach the motor back to our wet end. All right, so just a final cleaning of all of our surfaces that are going to be touching any of our gaskets. Make sure there's no pine straw or debris down here that'll get stuck in between. Now we can start reattaching our bolts. All right, now lastly, we're going to snug down all of our bolts. You don't like over tighten them, but as with anything, when you're tightening bolts that are in a circular pattern, you want to go in a star pattern, so across from each other. Don't get it all the way tight in the first pass, make a couple of passes. All right, and then make your second pass. All right. Normally we may need to get a bucket of water to prime this, but since this pump is below grade, we don't need that. But first, as we mentioned before, the Go Kit comes with a new lid O-ring, so we're going to go ahead and replace that. All right, so we're just going to open up the valve here. All right, now the equipment is primed. We're going to give it a shot and see if it works.